Alright, so this episode of The Walking Dead, I think it was titled Alone. It was an alright episode. I really wasn't too fond of the characters that they decided to highlight in this episode. Bob and Sasha, I could really care less about. Sorry, I'm getting messages. Okay. You'll notice that I have new glasses. In a couple more reviews, probably in 2 weeks, I will have my zombie contact lenses. So I will try those for my Walking Dead reviews. But for now, you have to deal with me in the glasses because I have to get used to them. Just came in today. And it's a very, very different prescription than I'm used to. Anyway, the episode opens up with Bob Stuckey out in the woods wandering around after he survived, just kind of telling you how he met Daryl and Glenn and got sucked into the group. Daryl asks him the customary questions, the 3 questions that you have to ask, and when you assume that Bob probably killed his girlfriend or his wife, maybe even daughter, I don't know. But he ends up deciding to go with the group because he trusts them. Daryl says, "Do you have any questions on joining us?" And Bob's like, "Nope, it doesn't matter who you are." So that's either going to mean... Oh, good Lord. So, that either means that Bob is going to end up being one of those that's going to be suckered into joining the hunters. He might even offer to eat, the flesh of one of his team members. He might even eat Sasha, who knows. He seems like he doesn't have a spine, so who knows what's going to end up happening with him. There's been some rumors that have said that they believe that Bob will be the one that will end up losing a limb. Now, there's some debate as to what body part the hunters are going to require their victim to cut off in the TV show. Because in the comic book it was a leg, but Herschel lost his leg, so it's probably not going to be a leg. Now, Rick, I believe, loses a hand in the comics, so it's probably either going to be a hand or an arm, more than likely, because the cannibals have to eat a full meal, so it's probably going to be like an arm or something. But I don't think it'll be a leg, because Herschel's already lost his leg. So, or it could... I'll get to that in a minute. Just had a thought passed to my head. Anyway, Bob, Sasha, and Maggie are heading towards Terminus. Maggie wants to go on ahead because she knows that Glenn will end up going. Sasha wants to settle down. She finds a warehouse that she wants to settle down in, blah, blah, blah. Bob kisses Sasha, tries to convince her to go with him because he's going to try to find Maggie and Glenn. Sasha ends up being the one that finds Maggie and rescues Maggie, and then they all hook back up on the railroad tracks heading towards Terminus. I didn't really like their storyline. Like I said, I don't really care for those characters. Except for Maggie. I like Maggie. But I don't really care for Sasha and Bob. I mean, they could get chopped up in little pieces right now, and I would not even care. But Beth finally decides, now that she's sobered up, that she will allow Daryl to help her train on the crossbow for, zombie hunting or whatever hunting. They're trying to hunt food. But Beth ends up getting caught in a bear trap, or a raccoon trap. I don't know what the hell it was. It didn't look big enough to be a bear trap, and it didn't really damage her leg enough to be a bear trap. So it's probably like a raccoon trap, a squirrel trap, something like that. I'm not a hunter, so I don't know. And this is kind of a hint as to the later storyline with these two. The hunters are obviously out hunting game, and she gets caught in a trap. So obviously someone's put that trap there, and it isn't to catch zombies. Well, they end up wandering into a cemetery, and they end up holding hands while they're standing at the graveyard of it. At first I thought maybe it was Daryl's father, but it turns out it wasn't, because this person only died in like the 1800s. It was just a random father, and I guess they were reminiscing, and they were holding hands. I kind of like them as a couple, though, so this is going to get very interesting. They end up going into what I first thought was a house, but it turns out it was a mortuary, a funeral home. You know, it's one of those that kind of has the house, the plantation type house, attached. And, you know, Beth goes to her customary, you know, saying grace or whatever the hell it is that she does to show respect to the dead. Because they found a walker inside the funeral home. Well, a dead body. It's starting to turn, so you assume it would have been a walker at some point. They found the house strangely stocked with a lot of food. So Daryl he's convinced that somebody is living there, and that they're basically just renting the place for now. He kind of wants to stay. Beth wants to leave a thank you note for the people, but Daryl wants to stay. They keep getting visited by this little dog with a missing eye, but the dog will run away. It doesn't want to come in the house. Eventually they hear the dog come back. We don't know if the dog gets eaten. We assume the dog gets eaten, but we don't hear the dog, like, yapping when the zombies finally do arrive, the walkers. But it seems funny. I'm sure the house is probably under surveillance. They were probably being scoped out by whoever was there. It seems like it was a trap. It really does seem like it was a trap. Because Beth is getting ready to write a thank you note, and they're about ready to leave, when all of a sudden, walkers attack. And they get separated. Daryl tells Beth to run. Well, Beth does run, but she leaves her purse out in the yard. And when Daryl finally is able to get outside, a car is rushing down the road. And Daryl assumes that apparently Daryl assumes that Beth left him. That Beth is in that car. I don't know if he assumes that Beth just hotwired this car rather than, you know, take off on foot. But apparently they didn't see the car to begin with. I didn't see a car when they first arrived. So he's assuming that Beth has left him. So he goes trotting off down the road, and he finds himself alone again, until these bunch of armed men surround him. Now these are probably the hunters. They're probably related to the group. I'm pretty sure the one guy, Joe I think is his name, I think I saw him in the house in Claimed. He was on the porch or something when Rick was hiding underneath the bed. I'm pretty sure that's the same group. So these are definitely probably the hunters, the same ones that set out the traps, and probably set the trap in the house to lure people in, and once they find food there, they're taking advantage of it. They're fattening them up. That's really what they're doing, is they're fattening people up so that they can eat them. Spoiler alert! But Daryl might end up joining this group initially to survive. And Beth, I think, was kidnapped by the hunters. Now, Beth's foot is injured. So, are the hunters going to amputate her foot and eat her foot? Which would be ironic considering that her father, Herschel, lost his leg. That would be kind of irony. Or will Daryl offer himself up as a sacrifice to save Beth's life? Will Daryl tell these men that he will lose a limb, like maybe his arm? Which would be interesting if Daryl chooses to lose an arm to save his and Beth's life to the hunters. Because remember, Merle lost his hand to survive. Will Daryl also be able to make that same sacrifice in order to survive? Now, we remember Daryl's got the crossbow. That's his weapon of choice. Will the fans like it, the fact that Daryl will no longer be able to shoot a crossbow? Or, this would be really, really cool. What if Daryl is as inventive as Merle was? Remember, Merle hooked up that sharp, knife thing on his hand to use as a weapon? What if Daryl can somehow rig up his stump as a crossbow? Would that not be the most awesome thing that you have seen on the show? Daryl with a crossbow arm. That would be awesome. I think it would. And that's what I think we will end up seeing eventually. I don't know if it's going to happen when they get to Terminus or before, but it's definitely coming. Fans need to be aware that it is coming. Until next week.